My sister-in-law deliberately ruined my father's funeral, turning it into her wedding announcement. He's dead, time for celebration, she laughed. My husband supported her. I said nothing, buried my grief and began planning. On her wedding day, she discovered the price of cruelty. I was adjusting the flowers on my father's casket when Rachel cleared her throat behind me. Everyone, she called out, clapping her hands together like she was hosting a birthday party. Since we're all gathered here today, I have wonderful news to share. My hands froze on the white lilies. The funeral home fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. I turned around slowly, hoping I'd misheard her. Rachel stood in the center of the room wearing a crisp white dress that looked suspiciously like something from a bridal catalog. Her smile was so bright it could have powered the entire building. "Kelsey and I are getting married," she announced, throwing her arms up like she'd just won a game show. 3 months from today. The gasps around the room weren't the good kind. Mrs. Patterson from next door actually stepped backward. My father's business partner dropped his program on the floor. I watched 30 faces turn from confused to horrified in real time. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories of quiet strength. If you believe that grief deserves respect and dignity, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. My husband Kelsey emerged from behind a flower arrangement, grinning like he'd just been crowned king of the world. He wrapped his arm around Rachel's waist and pulled her close. "We wanted to tell the family all at once," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Dad would have wanted us to celebrate life, right? Dad." He called my father Dad. The man who'd been gone for exactly 72 hours. "He's dead, time for celebration," Rachel laughed, the sound echoing off the funeral home walls. She actually threw her head back like she was at a comedy show. "Life's too short to wait around moping." I stood there like a statue, my hands still resting on the casket. The wood felt warm under my palm, probably from the heat of all the flowers. My father's photograph smiled at me from its silver frame, the same gentle expression he'd worn when he taught me to ride a bike, when he walked me down the aisle, when he held my hand during my mother's funeral 15 years ago. "Congratulations," someone mumbled from the back. I couldn't see who. The voices started blending together into a low murmur of awkward politeness. Rachel bounced on her toes. "We're thinking a spring wedding. Something elegant, you know? Maybe at the old family house." She gestured toward the casket like my father was part of the decorations. He always said that house was meant for celebrations. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sandpaper. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand they leave immediately. Instead, I heard myself saying, "How lovely." The words came out automatic, like I was reading from a script I'd never seen before. My voice sounded calm, even pleased. People started moving again, forming little clusters around Rachel and Kelsey. Handshakes and hugs and excited chatter about wedding plans filled the space where prayers and memories should have been. I walked to the back of the room and sat down in a folding chair that squeaked under my weight. My cousin Sarah approached with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This is completely inappropriate." "It's fine," I heard myself say again. "They're excited." Sarah stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "It's your father's funeral." "I know." I smoothed my black dress over my knees. "Family is important." She opened her mouth to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. She squeezed my shoulder and walked away, shaking her head. For the next hour, I watched my father's funeral transform into an engagement party. Rachel held court near the guest book, showing off the ring Kelsey had apparently given her sometime between the viewing and the service. People who'd come to pay their respects found themselves discussing flower arrangements and venue options. Mrs. Chen, who'd known my father for 20 years, approached me with confusion written all over her face. "Dear, is this how funerals are done now?" "Every family is different," I replied, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. She nodded uncertainly and drifted away. I noticed people starting to leave earlier than planned. The whole atmosphere had shifted from solemn remembrance to uncomfortable celebration. By the time we were supposed to head to the cemetery, half the attendees had already gone home. During the burial, Rachel kept checking her phone. She whispered to Kelsey about catering options while the priest read the final prayers. When they lowered my father's casket into the ground, She was scrolling through what looked like wedding dress websites. Back at the house that evening, I sat on our bedroom floor with my father's favorite photograph in my hands. The image showed him at last year's Christmas dinner, wearing the awful reindeer sweater I'd bought him as a joke. He'd loved it so much he wore it 3 times that week. I could hear Rachel and Kelsey in the kitchen below, their voices carrying up through the heating vents. They were talking about honeymoon destinations and guest lists. Every few minutes one of them would burst into laughter. She didn't even cry, Rachel's voice drifted upward. Not once. It's like she doesn't even care that he's gone. She's always been weird about emotions, Kelsey replied. Remember when her mom died? Same thing. Just stood there like a robot. At least now we don't have to pretend to include him in wedding planning, Rachel said. Can you imagine? Oh, let me ask my dad first. Ugh. Their laughter floated through the floorboards. I set the photograph down gently and reached for the notebook I kept in my nightstand drawer. Usually I used it for grocery lists and appointment reminders. Tonight I opened to a fresh page and wrote the date at the top. Then I started documenting everything I could remember. The white dress. The announcement timing. The exact words. The guests' reactions. The phone checking during the burial. Every detail that proved what kind of people they really were. I wasn't writing to preserve memories. I was writing to build evidence. My father had taught me that revenge was a dish best served cold, but he'd also taught me that the best strategies required careful planning. They won't forget this, I whispered to his photograph. Outside my window I could see the lights still on in the kitchen. They were probably making more wedding plans, celebrating their perfect timing and my apparent weakness. They thought I was broken, that grief had made me compliant and easy to ignore. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. The notebook grew thicker each week. By February I'd filled 37 pages with their daily habits, conversation snippets and weekend patterns. Rachel liked her coffee at exactly 7:15 each morning. Kelsey checked his phone obsessively between 9 and 10 p.m. They both assumed I was upstairs reading when they had their most candid conversations in the living room. I discovered that being ignored had unexpected advantages. When someone considers you invisible, they stop filtering their words around you. They forget you're even there. The caterer wants a deposit by March, Rachel mentioned one Tuesday evening, painting her nails bright red on our coffee table. Good thing we'll have access to the house account soon. Kelsey was sprawled across the couch, scrolling through sports highlights. How soon? Well, technically it's already hours since he's gone. We just need to sort out the paperwork. She blew on her nails. The lawyer said it might take a few months, but the house is definitely coming to us. I was folding laundry in the adjacent dining room, moving quietly between the table and the basket. They'd stopped noticing my presence weeks ago. To them I was just background noise, like the dishwasher running or the heater cycling on. What about the old documents in his desk? Kelsey asked. Should we go through those? Eventually. Most of it's probably junk anyway. Rachel capped her nail polish. I'm more interested in updating that kitchen. Those cabinets are so outdated. That Friday, while they were at Rachel's bachelorette planning lunch, I drove to my father's house. The spare key was still hidden under the third flower pot, exactly where it had been since I was 12. The familiar creak of the front door brought back memories of summer visits and holiday gatherings. His desk sat in the corner of the study, exactly as he'd left it. I started with the bottom drawer, working my way through old bills, insurance papers, and maintenance records. Most of it was routine household documentation, but tucked behind a folder of warranty information I found something interesting. The letter was dated 18 months ago, written on official county letterhead. It outlined a property tax dispute that had never been resolved. According to the documentation, my father had been contesting the assessed value, but the case had stalled somewhere in the bureaucratic maze. The house had accumulated significant back taxes during the dispute process. I photographed every page with my phone, then carefully replaced everything exactly where I'd found it. On my way out, I noticed Rachel had already started leaving little touches around the house. A throw pillow here, a decorative candle there. She was marking her territory before the ownership was even official. Monday morning I called my childhood friend Marcus. We'd grown up 3 houses apart and stayed in touch through Christmas cards and occasional coffee meetings. He'd mentioned during our last conversation that he worked for a property acquisition company. I need a favor, I told him over lunch at the diner near his office. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to purchase a property that had tax issues, how would they go about it? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Hypothetically. Let's just say I'm curious about the process. He explained how tax liens worked, how properties could end up in foreclosure, and how private buyers could sometimes step in before public auctions. The conversation was educational in ways I hadn't expected. When I mentioned my father's house specifically, Marcus offered to look into the legal status. I could pose as a potential buyer, he suggested, just to get the paperwork and see what's actually happening with the case. Within a week, Marcus had gathered enough information to confirm what the letter had implied. The property taxes hadn't been paid in 4 years. The county was preparing to move forward with foreclosure proceedings, but they'd been delayed due to my father's ongoing dispute. With him gone, the case would likely accelerate. I started spending my Tuesday and Thursday shopping trips, meeting with lawyers instead. I learned about estate settlements, property transfers, and legal loopholes that could work in creative ways. The consultation fees were adding up, but I'd been quietly moving money from our joint account into a separate savings account for months. Kelsey never checked our finances. He'd handed over all money management to me after our 3rd year of marriage, claiming he was too busy to deal with bank statements and budgets. That trust was about to become his biggest mistake. Meanwhile, their wedding planning conversations grew increasingly detailed. They'd chosen the ancestral house as their venue, assuming ownership would transfer smoothly. They'd already put deposits down with vendors, sent save-the-date cards, and started planning the honeymoon. One evening in late February, I was organizing kitchen cabinets when I overheard their most revealing conversation yet. "We should definitely convert the house into an Airbnb afterward," Rachel said. "Tourism is booming in this area. We could charge premium rates for a historic family home experience." Kelsey laughed. "Daddy's memories will pay for our honeymoon." That sentence stopped me cold. I stood frozen with a stack of dinner plates in my hands, letting their words sink in completely. They weren't just planning to live in my father's house. They were planning to commercialize it, to turn his lifetime of memories into profit for strangers. I carefully set the plates down and walked upstairs to retrieve my phone. That night, I started recording their conversations whenever possible. I bought a small digital recorder and learned how to use voice-activated recording apps. Every cruel joke, every dismissive comment, every plan to exploit my father's legacy got documented. By March, I had enough evidence to fuel my anger for years. But more importantly, I had enough information to build a strategy. Marcus had agreed to pose as a buyer when the time was right. The lawyers had outlined several possible approaches. The financial pieces were falling into place. Rachel and Kelsey continued treating me like furniture, never suspecting that the quiet woman folding their laundry was methodically dismantling their future. They saw grief and compliance where I was actually cultivating patience and precision. Their wedding was 3 months away. That gave me exactly enough time to ensure their celebration would be memorable for all the wrong reasons. The first time I saw them return from visiting the ancestral house, I understood what I was truly fighting for. Rachel practically floated through our front door, her cheeks flushed with excitement and her eyes bright with the kind of joy I hadn't seen since their engagement announcement. "The light in the morning room is absolutely perfect," she gushed to Kelsey, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. "We'll get ready there on the wedding day. Can you imagine the photos?" Kelsey wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Mom always said that room brought out everyone's best features." I was washing dishes at the sink, my back to them, but I could see their reflection in the window. They looked like they were planning to inhabit a fairy tale. The house wasn't just a venue to them. It was their birthright, their kingdom, their proof that they'd inherited something magnificent. "I called the photographer," Rachel continued. "She wants to do engagement shots on the front porch next weekend. Those columns are so dramatic." Over the following days, their visits to the house became ritualistic. Every Sunday afternoon, they'd drive over with measuring tapes and fabric samples, returning hours later with renewed energy and increasingly elaborate plans. They'd spread wedding magazines across our dining table, pointing out decorations that would complement the house's architecture. "The chandelier in the foyer needs cleaning," Rachel mentioned one evening, circling chandelier photos in a bridal magazine. "But once it's polished, it'll be the perfect backdrop for the ceremony." I started timing my own visits to the house for Tuesday mornings, when I knew they'd be at work. The elderly caretaker, Mr. Patel, still came by twice a week to check on things and maintain the garden. He'd known my father since they were both young men in the neighborhood. "Your father was good to my family," Mr. Patel told me on my third visit, his weathered hands gentle as he watered the roses. "When my wife was sick, he paid for her medicines without telling anyone. Good man." I helped him deadhead the flowers, enjoying the peaceful routine. "Tell me about when Kelsey and Rachel were children here," I said casually. His expression shifted slightly. "Young Master Kelsey was always kind. But that girl—" He paused, considering his words carefully. "He had a mean streak. Once locked our housemaid in the storage closet for 3 hours because the woman accidentally moved her dollhouse." "What happened?" "The maid was crying when we found her. Miss Rachel told everyone the woman was playing hide and seek." Mr. Patel's voice carried decades of suppressed frustration. "She was maybe 10 years old then, but already knew how to lie convincingly." These conversations painted a picture I'd never seen before. The house held memories of birthday parties where Rachel would deliberately exclude certain children, Diwali celebrations where she'd break other kids' gifts accidentally, and family gatherings where she'd manipulate adults into taking her side in every dispute. "The house spoiled her," Mr. Patel admitted during one of our gardening sessions. "Too much space to hide bad behavior. Too many rooms where adults couldn't see what she was really doing." Meanwhile, their wedding planning intensified. They'd hired a photographer for an engagement session specifically at the house, transforming the front porch into a romantic backdrop with string lights and flowing fabrics. Rachel posted the photos on social media with captions about coming home and family legacy. But I'd discovered something they didn't know. While organizing my father's financial documents for the lawyers, I'd found correspondence showing that property taxes on the house hadn't been paid in 4 years. My father had been fighting the assessment, believing the county had overvalued the property. The dispute had created a bureaucratic stalemate, but with his death, that protection was gone. Kelsey had no idea about any of this. Financial management had become my responsibility early in our marriage, especially after a business trip where I'd had him sign several documents he'd barely glanced at. He trusted me completely with money matters, preferring to focus on his career and social life. The tax situation meant the house was vulnerable in ways Rachel and Kelsey couldn't imagine. They were planning their future around a property that was heading toward foreclosure. Every deposit they placed with vendors, every invitation they ordered, every dream they built was founded on quicksand. I started researching the city's Historic Preservation Board, learning about their funding sources and priorities. The house qualified for historic designation based on its age and architectural significance. More importantly, properties under historic review often receive temporary protection from foreclosure proceedings. One afternoon, I made an anonymous phone call to the Preservation Board. "I'd like to make a donation in memory of someone who loved historic architecture," I told the receptionist. "Specifically to support the review of properties in the Heritage District." The donation was substantial enough to fund a comprehensive review of several properties, including my father's house. The process would add months to any foreclosure timeline, creating the perfect window for alternative solutions. Marcus had been monitoring the legal situation closely. "The county is moving forward with the foreclosure," he reported during one of our coffee meetings. "But this historic review will slow things down significantly. If we time it right, I can put in a private bid before it goes to public auction." "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 months if the Preservation Board moves slowly. The review process could stretch even longer if there are complications." That evening, I watched Rachel and Kelsey plan seating arrangements for their reception in the house's garden. They'd mapped out table locations under the old oak trees, envisioning a perfect May celebration surrounded by spring blooms. Their excitement was infectious, almost making me forget why I was sitting there taking notes on their every word. "Mom's china is still in the dining room hutch," Rachel mentioned, running her finger along our dining table as if she were already touching those dishes. "We'll use it for the head table. Something old, something borrowed." She had no idea that her mother's china, like everything else in that house, was about to slip through her fingers. The Preservation Board had already scheduled their initial assessment. Marcus was preparing the paperwork for his bid. The lawyers had confirmed the foreclosure timeline. All the childhood memories, all the family photographs, all the birthday parties and holiday celebrations that made that house their emotional center. None of it would protect them from what was coming. They thought they were inheriting a palace. Instead, they were planning a wedding in a house that would belong to someone else by their honeymoon. The morning of their wedding day dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the ancestral house. I arrived early under the pretense of helping with final preparations, carrying a basket of emergency supplies that brides always seem to need. Rachel was already there, surrounded by her bridesmaids in the morning room, getting her makeup done by a professional artist they'd flown in from the city. "Hand me my phone," Rachel commanded one of her bridesmaids, not bothering to say please. "I want to post a getting ready selfie." She looked radiant in her ivory lace gown, the kind of dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. The morning light caught the beading on her bodice, creating tiny rainbows across the walls. For a moment I almost felt sorry for what was about to happen. Almost. "The photographer wants you on the front steps in 10 minutes, another bridesmaid announced, checking her watch. "The lighting is perfect right now." I watched through the window as Kelsey emerged from the men's preparation room, adjusting his bow tie and grinning at his groomsmen. He looked happier than I'd seen him in years, practically bouncing on his toes with excitement. They'd both been counting down to this day for months, marking off calendar squares and checking items off their wedding timeline. The photo session on the front steps was everything they'd dreamed of. Rachel posed against the white columns, her dress flowing down the stone steps like something from a magazine. Kelsey joined her for couple shots, both of them laughing and stealing kisses between poses. I stood off to the side with the other family members, invisible as always, watching them create memories in front of a house that no longer belonged to them. "Beautiful couple," someone murmured beside me. "Absolutely," I agreed, checking my watch. 11:30. Right on schedule. At exactly noon, while the wedding party was taking group photos in the garden, I stepped away from the crowd and pulled out my phone. The local news station had a tip line that I'd researched weeks earlier. The reporter who answered sounded bored until I started talking. "You might want to check the county records today," I said, keeping my voice low. "There's a big family wedding happening at the Heritage District House on Maple Street. The thing is, the family doesn't actually own that house anymore. It was sold yesterday. The new owner might surprise you." "What kind of surprise?" The reporter's interest was clearly piqued. "Let's just say it's a story about community service and women helping women. The paperwork should be public record by now." I hung up and slipped back into the crowd, just in time to see Rachel tossing her bouquet to a group of squealing bridesmaids. They had no idea that 3 blocks away, a news van was already pulling into the station parking lot. The reception was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock in the back garden. White tents had been set up between the oak trees, with round tables draped in expensive linens and centerpieces that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. A string quartet played softly near the fountain while guests found their seats. That's when my phone started buzzing with notifications. The local news had posted their story online, and social media was already picking it up. "Family wedding turns into eviction drama," was trending locally within minutes. Rachel was still blissfully unaware, gliding between tables and accepting congratulations from guests. She looked like a princess in her own fairy tale, completely confident that this was her day, her house, her triumph. The catering manager approached her first, his face pale and worried. "Mrs. Patterson, we need to discuss something urgently." "Not now," Rachel waved him away. "Can't you see I'm greeting my guests?" "Ma'am, there's been a development with the property ownership. Our insurance company is requiring immediate clarification before we can continue service." Kelsey appeared at Rachel's side, his smile faltering. "What kind of development?" That's when their phones started ringing. Friends and family members who weren't at the wedding had seen the news story. Social media notifications were pinging constantly. Guests began pulling out their own phones, reading headlines and showing each other screenshots. "What's going on?" Rachel demanded, but her voice had an edge of panic now. The catering manager pulled out his tablet and showed them the news article. The headline read, "Historic Family Home Donated to Women's Shelter Network in Memory of Beloved Community Member." Rachel's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "This is impossible. This is our house. Ma'am, according to this article, the property was transferred yesterday to a nonprofit organization. The title change was processed through the county clerk's office. Kelsey was frantically scrolling through his phone, trying to access county records. This has to be a mistake. Some kind of clerical error. But it wasn't a mistake. Marcus had executed the purchase perfectly, timing the title transfer to become public record exactly 24 hours before their wedding. The press release from the Women's Shelter Network had been scheduled to go out simultaneously, creating maximum impact. The story was already spreading beyond local news. Ancestral Home Becomes Safe Haven was being shared across multiple platforms, with photos of the house and quotes from shelter administrators about creating healing spaces for women escaping difficult situations. Within an hour, vendors started backing out. The florist packed up the remaining arrangements. The DJ announced he couldn't continue without proper venue authorization. The photographer stopped taking pictures, uncertain about liability issues. Rachel was no longer the radiant bride from the morning photos. Her makeup was smeared from crying angry tears, and her voice had gone hoarse from arguing with vendors. "This is sabotage," she kept screaming. "Someone is deliberately ruining our wedding." Kelsey tried calling the lawyer who had handled our prenuptial agreement, but the number went straight to a disconnected message. He didn't know that I'd quietly switched legal representation 6 months ago, or that our new attorney had ensured all our financial arrangements would protect my interests if our marriage fell apart. Guests began leaving in confused clusters, unsure whether to offer congratulations or condolences. The ones who stayed seemed more interested in witnessing the drama than celebrating the marriage. "We can move the reception to the hotel," someone suggested. "With what money?" Kelsey snapped. Everything was supposed to be paid for through the house account. That's when the full scope of their financial situation began unraveling. The deposits they'd paid to vendors, the loans they'd taken against the house's value, the credit they'd extended based on expected inheritance. All of it was built on ownership they'd never actually possessed. I stood in the shadow of an oak tree, watching their perfect day crumble like a house of cards in a windstorm. They spun around each other frantically, trying to solve problems that had no solutions, grasping for control of a situation I'd spent months carefully orchestrating. The irony was perfect. They'd planned their celebration in a house full of memories, and now their wedding day would create the most memorable moment of all, the day their fairy tale collapsed completely. By Sunday morning, the wedding disaster had become the top story on 3 local news stations. I made coffee in my quiet kitchen while watching Rachel's meltdown play on repeat across every channel. The footage showed her in her ruined wedding dress, screaming at the catering manager while mascara streaked down her cheeks. Someone had captured the moment she threw her bouquet at a departing guest, the flowers exploding against a car window in slow motion. The hashtag WeddingGate was trending locally by noon. Social media users were sharing screenshots of Rachel's old posts about inheriting family legacy, alongside photos of her tantrum. The comments were brutal but fair. People were calling her entitled, spoiled, and worse things that the news stations couldn't broadcast. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Mrs. Chin. "Saw the news. Are you okay, dear?" I typed back, "Just fine, thank you for asking." The women's shelter had scheduled a press conference for Monday afternoon, right on the front steps where Rachel had posed for her wedding photos just 2 days earlier. I drove by during my lunch break and found the street packed with news vans and community supporters. A banner reading "Safe Homes for Strong Women" hung between the same columns where Rachel had dreamed of saying her vows. The shelter director, a woman named Patricia with silver hair and kind eyes, spoke about the donation with genuine emotion. "This beautiful home will provide transitional housing for women rebuilding their lives." Mr. Patel believed every woman deserved safety and dignity. Behind her, I could see women from the shelter holding their children, some wiping away tears of gratitude. One young mother stepped forward to speak about fleeing an abusive situation with nothing but the clothes on her back. The contrast between her quiet strength and Rachel's public breakdown couldn't have been more stark. The story was picked up by regional news outlets by Tuesday. "Local wedding becomes symbol of community support," ran across 3 counties. Rachel's name was attached to every article, but not in the way she'd always imagined. Instead of being celebrated as a beautiful bride, She was known as the woman who'd thrown a public tantrum when her entitlement was exposed. Kelsey burst through our front door Wednesday evening like a hurricane, his face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and his usually perfect hair stuck up in several directions. "How could you do this to us?" he shouted, slamming his briefcase down on the kitchen counter hard enough to rattle the dishes. "My coworkers are laughing at me. My boss asked if I need time off to handle my personal affairs. Rachel can't leave her apartment because reporters keep calling her." I continued folding laundry at the dining room table, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Do what exactly? Don't play innocent. You orchestrated this whole thing. The house sale, the timing, everything." I set down the shirt I'd been folding and walked to the filing cabinet in our home office. The prenuptial agreement was exactly where I'd kept it for 7 years, in a folder labeled Legal Documents. I pulled it out and placed it on the counter between us. "You signed this," I said, pointing to his signature on the bottom of page 3. Section 12 clearly states that any inheritance disputes would be handled through individual legal representation, not shared assets. Kelsey stared at the document like he'd never seen it before. "That's not what this is about. Read Section 15. I turned the page for him. "You agreed that financial decisions made during periods of family crisis would be protected from spousal interference. You left me alone to bury my father while you celebrated with her. I made decisions accordingly." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't seriously be using a technicality from our prenup to justify destroying our lives." "I didn't destroy anything. I honored my father's memory by ensuring his house would help women who actually need safety." I closed the document and looked directly into his eyes. "You chose her side at his funeral. These are the consequences." He stood there for a long moment, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured balloon. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and bitter. "I'm filing for divorce. That's your choice." I picked up the shirt I'd been folding. "I won't contest it." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'll make it easy for you. No fighting, no drama. You can have whatever personal belongings you want. The lawyers can handle the rest." Thursday morning, Kelsey was served with divorce papers at his office. By Thursday evening, he was back home with 2 large suitcases, packing his clothes with the efficiency of someone who wanted to finish an unpleasant task quickly. "The joint checking account is frozen," he said from the closet, his voice muffled by hanging clothes. "No, it's not. You just don't have access anymore." I sat on the bed watching him stuff shirts into his suitcase without folding them. "I moved your portion to a separate account. The information is on the kitchen counter." He emerged from the closet holding a stack of ties. "What about the house? What about it? My name is on the deed." "Actually, it's not. Hasn't been for 6 months." I handed him an envelope from the nightstand. "Your signature was removed when you signed those papers during our anniversary dinner. You thought they were insurance updates." Kelsey's face went pale as he opened the envelope and scanned the documents. "You tricked me. I protected myself. There's a difference." He finished packing in silence, moving through our shared spaces like a stranger collecting borrowed items. When he reached the front door with his 2 suitcases, he turned back one last time. "Rachel was right about you," he said. "You're not the person I married." "No," I agreed. "I'm better." After he left, the house felt larger and quieter than it had in years. I made myself dinner, watched the evening news coverage of the shelter's renovation plans, and went to bed early for the first time in months. Friday brought an unexpected message to my phone from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Jake, Kelsey's cousin. I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I just wanted to say I always admired your strength during family gatherings. I never realized how quiet power works until now. What you did for those women was incredible. I hope you're doing well." I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The weekend passed peacefully. No wedding planning conversations echoed through my house. No cruel laughter drifted up from the kitchen. No one called me boring or spineless or compared me to the dead. For the first time since my father's funeral, I felt completely, genuinely at peace. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a handwritten invitation in my mailbox. The Women's Shelter Network was hosting an open house to show the community how the donated property had been transformed. The invitation was signed by Patricia, the shelter director, with a personal note. "We'd love for you to see what your father's gift has become." I drove over on a sunny Saturday morning, parking across the street where I could see the full transformation. The house looked completely different. The weathered gray siding had been painted a warm butter yellow that seemed to glow in the morning light. New flower beds lined the walkway, bursting with colorful annuals that created a welcoming path to the front door. Even the old iron fence had been repaired and painted white, making the property look cared for in a way it hadn't been in years. A small girl with pigtails was sitting on the front porch, coloring in a book while her mother chatted with another woman nearby. When she saw me approaching, she looked up and waved enthusiastically, her crayon still clutched in her tiny fist. I waved back, surprised by the simple joy in that gesture. "Are you here for the tour?" asked a volunteer at the front door, offering me a name tag and an informational brochure. "We're so excited to show everyone what this place has become." Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. The formal living room where Rachel used to hold court had been converted into a children's play area, with soft carpeting, low bookshelves, and bins full of toys. Crayon drawings were taped to the walls at child height, creating a colorful gallery of stick figures, rainbows, and houses with crooked chimneys. The dining room had become a computer lab with several workstations where women could search for jobs, complete online education courses, or video chat with family members. A bulletin board displayed success stories, photos of graduates who had found permanent housing, completed job training programs, or started their own businesses. "This used to be someone's family home," Patricia explained to a small group of visitors. The donor specifically wanted it to become a place where women could rebuild their own families in safety. I followed the tour upstairs, where the bedrooms had been converted into private living spaces for residents. Each room was simple but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and small dresser. What struck me most were the personal touches: children's artwork taped to mirrors, family photos on nightstands, books stacked carefully on windowsills. In what used to be the master bedroom, I found a wall display that made me stop in my tracks. It was covered with framed letters from former residents, thanking the shelter for helping them escape dangerous situations. Some were typed, others handwritten in careful script, but all conveyed the same message of gratitude and hope. One letter caught my attention. "Dear staff, when I arrived here with my 2 children, I had nothing but the clothes on our backs and fear in my heart. This house gave us more than shelter. It gave us time to heal and plan for a real future." My daughter draws pictures of this house when people ask her about her safe place. "Thank you for showing us that not all homes have to be scary." At the bottom of the display was a small plaque I hadn't noticed from the doorway: "In memory of families who deserve safety, dignity, and hope." Patricia appeared beside me as I read the letters. "The donor asked us to create this display," she said quietly. "She wanted people to understand that homes should be places of peace, not fear." "The donor?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "A local woman who lost her father recently. She said he taught her that real strength comes from protecting others, not from having power over them." Patricia touched the plaque gently. "She visits sometimes, usually when she thinks no one will notice. Always brings books for the children's library." I made my way back downstairs, where the tour was ending, in the kitchen. The old formal dining room had been opened up to create a large community space where residents could cook together, share meals, and build the kind of friendships that help people heal from trauma. A woman named Maria was preparing lunch with her teenage daughter, both of them laughing as they tried to flip pancakes without making a mess. "We've been here 4 months, Maria told another visitor. "My daughter's grades have improved so much since we moved in. She says this is the first place that's ever felt like home." Before leaving, I walked to the fireplace in what used to be the formal living room. Someone had placed a small table nearby where visitors could sign a guest book or leave donations. Above the mantel, in a simple wooden frame, was my father's last photograph, the one from Christmas dinner where he wore that ridiculous reindeer sweater. Beneath it, exactly as I'd requested, was a brass plaque: "For every daughter who was told to stay silent. In memory of Arvind Patel, a man who listened." A woman approached the memorial while I was standing there, holding a young boy's hand. "Who was he?" the child asked, pointing at the photograph. "Someone who believed all children should feel safe in their homes," she answered softly. I signed the guest book using my maiden name, then walked back to my car. A reporter from the local paper was interviewing Patricia on the front steps, asking about the shelter's success rate and future plans. I heard Patricia mention that 90% of their residents had found permanent housing within 6 months, and that they had a waiting list of women hoping for admission. What about the original family who lived here? The reporter asked. Do they ever visit? The house belongs to the community now, Patricia replied diplomatically. But I think the man who used to live here would be proud of what it's become. Driving home, I thought about Rachel and Kelsey for the first time in weeks. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Rachel had moved back in with her parents, and that Kelsey was renting a small apartment across town. Their fairy tale ending had crumbled completely, but somehow that felt less important now than it had months ago. People occasionally asked if I missed them, if I regretted the way things had ended, if I ever wondered what might have been different. The truth was simple. I didn't miss them at all. I only missed my father, and now his memory was doing something meaningful in the world. I hadn't just taken their house. I'd given it purpose, transformed their symbol of privilege into a beacon of hope for women who had nowhere else to go. In choosing healing over hatred, I'd built something greater than revenge. I'd built peace, for myself and for every woman who walked through those yellow doors seeking safety. That felt like the best possible ending to the story. If this story of quiet justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when she placed her father's photograph in the shelter, transforming revenge into healing. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.